The first red flag wasn't dramatic. It wasn't lipstick on a collar or a late-night confession. It was a word. Companion. I didn't even realize how hard it hit me until later. The reception was on the 52nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Chicago. The kind of place where the elevators glide silently and the walls are made of mirrors that force you to look at yourself from every angle. It was hosted by Emily's CEO, Ray Norton. Closed guest list. Invitation only. Executives, investors, senior leadership. Emily told me it was mostly internal. Said it would be boring. Said I'd hate it. She didn't say I shouldn't come. She just framed it like I wouldn't want to. That subtle difference matters now. All week she'd been on edge. On her phone constantly, but somehow unreachable at the same time. Smiling at messages she wouldn't explain. Telling me not to wait up because she had prep calls. I told myself it was pressure. Promotions don't come easy. She'd been chasing that executive seat for years. But when she mentioned the reception, something in my gut tightened. I asked what time it started. 7, she said. And you didn't think to bring me? She hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Then she laughed lightly. Of course you can come if you want. I just didn't think it would be your scene. There was that phrase again. Your scene. As if I no longer fit into hers. So I shaved carefully. Put on the charcoal suit she once said made me look dangerous. Ironed my own shirt. She barely looked at me when we left the house. In the Uber, she kept adjusting the bracelet on her wrist. I hadn't seen it before. Thin platinum band. Minimalist. Elegant. Not flashy. But expensive enough that it whispered instead of shouted. When the streetlights hit it, I saw engraving on the inside. New? I asked. She pulled her hand into her lap. Oh, yeah. Just something from work. Work gives jewelry now? She rolled her eyes. Recognition program. You wouldn't get it. You wouldn't get it. The words were small. Dismissive. Not cruel enough to fight over. Just sharp enough to leave a mark. We stepped into the building, and the air changed. Polished marble floors. Quiet security presence. Soft music drifting down from above. Everyone in tailored suits. Women in sleek dresses that looked like they'd been fitted that afternoon. At the check-in desk, a young woman with a tablet smiled professionally. Name? Emily Hale, I said. Her finger moved across the screen. Tap. Scroll. Pause. Her expression flickered. It was subtle, but I saw it. Yes, she said slowly. Ms. Hale. And her +1. She glanced at me, then back at the tablet. And you are. There was no name printed next to hers. No Mark Hale. No spouse. I leaned slightly to the side and caught the reflection of the screen in the glossy surface of the desk. +1 V. I. P. Companion. Not husband. Companion. My throat felt dry. I'm her husband, I said evenly. Another hesitation. She typed something, probably overriding whatever system label had been set. Then she handed me a badge. Mark, guest. Emily's badge read, Emily Hale, Executive Leadership. No +1 listed beneath it. No mention of me at all. I tried to brush it off. Corporate databases are messy. Maybe V. I. P. Companion was some generic tag for executive escorts. Maybe it didn't mean anything. But the staff's hesitation told a different story. Inside, the room glowed in gold and amber tones. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Conversations hummed in low, controlled waves. The city skyline stretched behind floor-to-ceiling windows like a backdrop designed to impress. Emily changed the second we walked in. Her posture straightened. Her smile sharpened. She didn't look nervous. She looked prepared, like someone stepping into a role she'd rehearsed. Then she saw me still at her side. Another flicker. Mark, she said brightly. You made it. Made it. Like I'd traveled from somewhere else. I leaned in to kiss her cheek. Her perfume was different. Not the floral one I bought her last Christmas. This was darker, warmer, something chosen deliberately. When I pulled back, my eyes drifted to her wrist again. That bracelet. Up close, I could read the engraving. And 2 letters. My stomach dropped. Before I could say anything, she covered it with her palm. Not casually, instinctively, like someone shielding a password. What does it stand for? I asked quietly. She laughed too fast. You are unbelievable. It's a question. It stands for Recognition Network, she snapped under her breath. It's an internal thing. Recognition Network. R.N. Ray Norton, the CEO hosting the event. I didn't accuse her. I didn't even change my tone. I just hadn't seen it before. She leaned closer, still smiling for the people around us. Her voice, though, lost all warmth. You're doing that thing again. What thing? Looking for problems. Creating drama where there isn't any. It's exhausting, Mark. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not anger. Embarrassment. A couple nearby were pretending not to listen. I could see it in the way their bodies angled subtly toward us. I asked about a bracelet. And now you're going to spiral, she said softly. In the middle of my CEO's reception. Do you have any idea how that looks? There it was. The shift. Not her explaining. Her reframing. You're jealous of my work, she continued, voice light but sharp beneath the surface. You've been weird about it for months. Weird. Months. I've supported you, I said. And I appreciate that, she replied quickly, as if rehearsed. But this insecurity thing? It's not attractive. Insecurity. Just like that, I wasn't a husband noticing inconsistencies. I was a man threatened by his wife's success. She turned away from me mid-conversation and waved toward someone across the room. Ray! My heart didn't race. It slowed. And that was when I saw him walking toward her. Confident. Relaxed. Familiar. And I realized the night wasn't going to end the way I'd hoped. This wasn't about a bracelet. It was about a role I didn't know I'd been replaced in. Ray Norton looked exactly like the kind of man who never waited for anything. Mid-40s, perfectly tailored navy suit. Silver at his temples that probably wasn't accidental. He moved through the room with the ease of someone who owned not just the company, but the oxygen inside it. Conversations adjusted around him. People straightened when he approached, and Emily's entire posture shifted when he did. Ray, she said, her voice warmer than it had been with me all night, warmer than it had been with me in months. Emily, he replied smoothly, his eyes lingering just a second too long. Then they moved to me, calculating, measuring. And you must be, he extended his hand. Mark, her husband. I held his gaze as I shook it. His grip was firm, practiced, not aggressive, just confident enough to remind you where you stood. Of course, he said. Glad you could make it. Could make it. Not glad to meet you. Not I've heard so much about you. Just glad you could make it. As if I'd shown up unexpectedly. His hand rested lightly on Emily's lower back as he turned to include her in a nearby conversation. Not a grab. Not even a squeeze. Placement. Like it had been there before. Like it knew exactly where to land. She didn't flinch. She didn't step away. She didn't even seem to notice. I told myself I was overanalyzing. Executives are touchy. Networking is physical. Proximity builds trust. I'd read enough business books to understand the psychology of it. But this didn't feel like strategy. Felt like habit. I stepped aside while they talked. Ray leaned in slightly when he spoke to her. Emily laughed at something he said, and it wasn't her polite corporate laugh. It was softer, mate. The kind she used to reserve for me when we stayed up too late in our first apartment. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not jealousy. Recognition. This wasn't new. This was established. Standing there, watching them, my mind started replaying the last few months like security footage I'd ignored. The late meetings. Emily used to hate working past 6. She'd complain about burnout, about leadership exploiting loyalty. Then suddenly she was volunteering for extra calls. Strategic sessions. Executive alignment dinners. She came home wired instead of tired. Overstimulated. Like someone who'd been running on adrenaline. Her phone. Always face down. Notifications muted. If it buzzed while we were watching TV, she'd flip it over casually, glance at it, then say, "Work," before I could even ask. Sometimes she'd smile at the screen and then immediately neutralize her expression when she realized I was looking. The perfume. She'd never been into heavy scents. Said they gave her headaches. Then one night she came home smelling different. Rich, masculine undertone. When I mentioned it, she said it was from hugging colleagues in tight elevators. Elevators. Chicago office buildings have big elevators. The workouts. Suddenly she was going to the gym at odd hours. 10 at night. 6 in the morning. She'd come back flushed but not exhausted. Charged. Like she hadn't been lifting weights. She'd been living something. The distance. That was the worst part. She stopped telling me about her day. Not abruptly. Gradually. Conversations became summaries. Bullet points. It was fine. Busy. You wouldn't understand, it's corporate politics. Whenever I asked follow-up questions, she'd sigh. You always interrogate me. Interrogate. Asking about your spouse's day is interrogation now. She stopped asking about mine entirely. My job running a small mechanical repair shop used to fascinate her. She loved hearing about the machines, the weird breakdowns, the problem-solving. She'd call me MacGyver when I fixed something complicated. Then one night at a work mixer she introduced me as, "Mark works with equipment." With equipment. Like I operated forklifts in a warehouse. I remember laughing it off. Now it felt like a rehearsal. A soft distancing. She started correcting me in public. Not harshly. Just small adjustments. Tone policing. "Mark, that's not quite how it works. You're oversimplifying." Always in front of people who mattered to her. I didn't fight it because I didn't want to look defensive. Tonight, standing under gold lighting, watching her tilt her head toward Ray Norton like he was gravity itself, all those moments lined up. Not coincidences. Pattern. Ray's hand was back on her waist. Lower this time. Not inappropriate enough to call out. Just familiar enough to confirm. She angled her body toward him fully now, shutting me out of the triangle. I stood slightly behind them like an afterthought. Like security. A waiter passed with champagne. I took a glass I didn't want. I overheard fragments of their conversation. "After Aspen," Ray was saying. Emily smiled. "That was a risk. You handled it beautifully." Aspen. She'd told me that conference was canceled. Budget cuts. She'd said she'd stayed in Chicago that week, working remotely. My hand tightened around the glass. Ray leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We'll talk in the VIP lounge." VIP. The word echoed. I followed his glance toward a semi-transparent partition at the far end of the room. Security stood discreetly near the entrance. Only certain badges had access. Emily's badge had a small silver stripe at the bottom. Mine did not. She looked back at me briefly. Just a flicker. Then she touched Ray's arm lightly. "I'll join you in a minute." He nodded and stepped away toward the partition. Emily turned to me, smile reassembled. "See?" she said lightly. "This is why I didn't want you to come. You get in your head." I stared at her. "In my head? You're spiraling. Over nothing." Nothing. The bracelet with his initials. The +1 labeled companion. The cancelled Aspen trip. The VIP section I couldn't enter. Nothing. "You've been distant for months," I said quietly. She sighed like I just complained about the weather. "I've been busy. There's a difference." "Busy doesn't change who you are." Her eyes hardened. "Maybe I've just grown." Grown. Past me. Past us. Around us, people moved like everything was normal. But inside me, something settled into place with cold clarity. This wasn't insecurity. This wasn't imagination. This was erasure. And I wasn't crazy. I was just the last one to admit what I was seeing. And I hadn't even walked toward the VIP section yet. I told myself I wasn't going to look. That I wasn't going to become the guy hovering near velvet ropes, trying to catch glimpses of something that would only humiliate him further. But there's a point where denial becomes self-betrayal. Emily was still talking, something about strategic positioning and market leverage, but her eyes kept drifting toward the partition. Toward him. Toward Ray. "Are you going in there?" I asked, nodding subtly toward the VIP section. She followed my gaze and stiffened just slightly. "It's executive access," she said carefully. "Not everyone is cleared. Not everyone. I'm your husband. And this is business," she replied. "You don't have to take everything personally." Everything. As if I'd been collecting imaginary slights. As if the bracelet on her wrist didn't carry his initials. As if the guest list hadn't labeled someone as a companion. She checked her phone. "I have to join him. We're discussing next quarter projections." At a cocktail reception. Behind a restricted partition. With security. I nodded slowly. "Go ahead." She hesitated for half a second, studying my face like she was assessing damage control. Then she gave me a quick, almost formal kiss on the cheek. Felt like a handshake. And she walked away. Her heels clicked steadily across the floor. Confident. Certain. When she reached the partition, the security guard scanned her badge. The silver stripe flashed under the light, and the rope shifted aside. She didn't look back. The guard returned the rope to its place. I stood there with my plain white badge that said guest. For a moment I considered leaving. Walking out quietly. Calling a cab. Going home. But something inside me refused to exit without certainty. So I moved. Not directly toward the entrance, that would have drawn attention, but along the outer wall where the partition met the glass windows. It was semi-transparent, designed to obscure but not completely block visibility. From certain angles you could see silhouettes, shapes, movements. I positioned myself near a tall decorative plant and pretended to study the skyline. From there I could see inside. Ray was standing close to her. Too close for business. They weren't reviewing documents. There were no tablets out. No charts projected on the wall. Just two glasses of something dark and expensive. And proximity. He leaned down slightly to say something into her ear. She didn't pull back. She smiled. Not the corporate smile. The private one. His hand moved again, this time resting at her waist more openly. Not accidental. Not ambiguous. Possessive. Her body leaned toward him in response. Familiar. Practiced. My stomach didn't flip. It dropped. Because in that moment it wasn't suspicion anymore. It was pattern confirmation. They weren't hiding in the VIP lounge because it was business. They were there because it was understood. He brushed a strand of hair away from her shoulder. She let him. My chest felt hollow. And then I saw it. His fingers traced lightly over the bracelet on her wrist. The one engraved with R.N. He tapped it playfully, like it was an inside joke. Like a mark. She laughed softly and nudged him in response. Not offended. Not surprised. Used to it. A server approached them and whispered something. I shifted slightly, pretending to adjust my jacket. That's when I overheard it. Two staff members standing near a service door behind me were speaking in low tones. "Is she going back in with him?" one asked. "Yeah," the other replied. "Private room upstairs." Again. Security's been told not to let anyone through. Again. Private room. Security instructed in advance. The words didn't hit like a punch. They settled like concrete. This wasn't a first time. This wasn't a spontaneous lapse. This was routine. Scheduled. Managed. I didn't storm in. I didn't demand explanations. Because I understood something in that moment. If I walked in angry, I'd be the unstable husband crashing an executive event. She'd frame it as paranoia. Ray would stay composed. And I'd lose. So I stood there a few seconds longer. Long enough to watch him place his hand at the small of her back again. Long enough to see her tilt her face up toward his. Long enough to erase every last thread of doubt. Then I stepped away. No drama. No scene. I walked past the bar. Past the skyline. Past the registration desk where I'd first seen the word companion. The elevator ride down felt slower than the one up. When the doors closed, my reflection stared back at me from every mirrored surface. I didn't look enraged. I looked calm. And that scared me more. Because anger means you're still fighting. Calm means you've accepted. In the lobby, the night air hit my face as the revolving doors turned. Chicago was alive below. Horns, traffic, lights reflecting off wet pavement. People laughing on sidewalks. Normal life. I stood there for a moment, hands in my pockets. The marriage hadn't ended upstairs. It had ended months ago. Tonight was just the confirmation. Sitting in my car, I didn't cry. I didn't punch the steering wheel. I replayed everything. The late nights. The canceled Aspen trip. The perfume. The bracelet. The way she'd called me insecure. The way she'd said I'd grown weird. The way she'd said I wouldn't understand her world. She hadn't just cheated. She'd been phasing me out. Editing me out of her narrative. Replacing husband with companion. Replacing partnership with performance. I started the engine. Not because I was escaping, but because I knew something clearly for the first time in months. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. And I wasn't going to explode. Because explosions give people something to point at. I was going to leave the way truth leaves your system when you finally process it. Quietly. Completely. Without spectacle. The cocktail reception wasn't the catastrophe. It was the rescue. And she didn't even know it yet. I didn't go home right away. I drove. Not fast. Not reckless. Just aimless enough to let the city blur into streaks of red and white. Chicago at night feels different when you're not part of it. When you're moving through it with something broken inside you. I kept replaying the staff member's voice in my head. Private room upstairs. Again. Again. That word did more damage than anything I'd seen behind the partition. It meant pattern. It meant history. It meant this wasn't some sudden emotional slip that happened under pressure. It meant she'd been living a parallel life. And I'd been adjusting myself around it without realizing. I pulled over near the river and K** led the engine. The dashboard lights faded. And for the first time all night, it was quiet. That's when the replay started. Not the event. The months. Emily used to text me during the day. Random things. A picture of a weird spreadsheet. A joke about someone misusing corporate jargon. A selfie from her desk when she was bored. Those stopped. Gradually. Then came the new boundaries. If I don't respond, I'm in meetings. Please don't call unless it's urgent. Can you not drop by the office unannounced? It looks unprofessional. Unprofessional. I brought her lunch once. Just once. She'd smiled too tightly when I showed up. Later that night, she told me it made her look small. Small. I used to make her feel supported. Now I made her look small. Her language changed too. She started talking about alignment and trajectory at home. About outgrowing environments. About elevating your circle. I remember laughing one night and saying, "When did you become a podcast?" She didn't laugh. "Maybe I've just evolved," she'd said. Evolved. Past me. I thought marriage meant growing together. Apparently it meant competing. There were other things. Subtle humiliations. At a neighborhood barbecue, someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, she said, "Mark's very hands-on. He fixes things. Very hands-on. Like I was a hobbyist tinkering in a garage." Later that week, she mentioned how Ray had complimented her executive presence. She said it like it mattered. Like it meant something I didn't understand. Maybe it did. But I understood enough now. The bracelet. That was the turning point. When had she gotten it? Why hadn't she mentioned it? Why did it have his initials? I took out my phone and scrolled back through pictures. 2 months ago, dinner at home. No bracelet. 6 weeks ago, photo at a fundraiser. No bracelet. 4 weeks ago, she's wearing long sleeves. 3 weeks ago, there it is. Subtle. Half hidden. The week she said she had back-to-back strategy sessions. The week Aspen was canceled. Aspen. I opened my email and searched. She'd forwarded me a cancellation notice for the conference. But looking at it now, it wasn't from the official event address. It was from a generic Gmail account. I stared at the screen. She hadn't just lied. She'd constructed. That takes planning. And planning means intention. I leaned back in the driver's seat and closed my eyes. There's a specific kind of pain when you realize you've been arguing against your own intuition. Every time I questioned something, she turned it. You're insecure. You're jealous of my success. You always assume the worst. I started believing that about myself. I started censoring my own instincts. That's the worst part of betrayal, not the act. The erosion. The slow rewriting of your reality. By the time you see the truth, you've already doubted yourself so many times that you hesitate to trust what's right in front of you. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were steady. That surprised me. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicking. I felt resolved. That's when I made the decision. Not to confront her tonight. Not to demand answers. Not to text her a photo of what I'd seen. I was done trying to win arguments. I was done defending my perception. I was done competing with a man who thought he could rest his hand on my wife's waist like he owned the space. You can't argue someone back into loyalty, and you can't convince someone to respect you if they've already decided you're beneath their trajectory. So I started thinking practically. Assets, accounts, the house. We bought it together, but I'd put down most of the deposit from the sale of my old property. I kept records, because I'm cautious. Because machinery doesn't forgive carelessness. I drove home slowly. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. She wasn't back yet. Private room upstairs. Again. I went inside and stood in the living room. For the first time, it felt like someone else's space. Her decorative choices. Her minimalist aesthetic. Her framed executive award on the wall. I walked into my small office and opened the filing cabinet. Contracts. Bank statements, mortgage paperwork, investment accounts, insurance policies. Everything was organized, because I've always believed in documentation, not out of paranoia, out of discipline. I laid them out on the desk, one by one, not in anger, in clarity. This wasn't revenge. It was preparation. The front door clicked open around midnight. I didn't move. Her heels echoed faintly across the hardwood. She paused when she saw the office light on. "Mark?" she called. I stepped into the hallway. She looked composed. Too composed. "How was the reception?" she asked lightly. Reception. I studied her face. No guilt. No panic. Just control. "It was enlightening," I said calmly. She smiled faintly. "See? I told you you'd overthink it." Overthink it. I nodded slowly. "You're right," I said. She blinked, slightly thrown off. "I have been overthinking." Relief flickered across her expression. "I'm glad you can admit that." Admit. As if I'd been wrong. As if the private room upstairs didn't exist. As if security hadn't been briefed in advance. I stepped back into the office. "I'm going to bed," I said. She lingered for a second like she expected more. An argument, an accusation, a scene. When none came, she relaxed. And that's when I knew. She was used to managing me, used to redirecting, used to winning. I closed the office door quietly. And for the first time in months, I wasn't confused. I wasn't chasing answers. I wasn't trying to decode her tone. I was done asking questions. Because the only question that mattered had already been answered behind a semi-transparent partition. And now it was my move. Not loudly. Not emotionally. Strategically. She thought she'd evolved. She had no idea I had too. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Not because I'd slept well. Because my mind was already moving. Emily was still asleep beside me, turned away, breathing slow and steady. I watched the back of her shoulder for a moment, trying to match the person in this bed with the woman from the VIP lounge. It felt like looking at two different people stitched into one body. She stirred slightly. Her hand shifted under the pillow. The bracelet caught the faint light coming through the blinds. And I got up quietly. In the kitchen, I made coffee the same way I always did. 2 cups. Out of habit. Then I paused. I poured one back into the pot. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, already dressed for work. Polished. Composed. "You're up early," she said, scanning me carefully. measuring tone, assessing atmosphere. Couldn't sleep. She nodded, as if that confirmed something she'd expected. Big week, she added. A lot of moving pieces. Moving pieces. I looked at her wrist. She noticed. Without thinking, she tugged her sleeve down. Reflex. Are you going in early? I asked. Yeah. Ray wants to go over some numbers before the board call. Ray. She didn't say Mr. Norton. She didn't say the CEO. Just Ray. Casual. Familiar. I won't be home for dinner, she added. Client dinner. Of course. I nodded slowly. No problem. She hesitated. She was waiting. For suspicion. For tension. For me to challenge it. When I didn't, she seemed almost unsettled. You okay? She asked. I'm fine. And I was. Not fine like ignorant. Fine like decided. She studied me another second, then grabbed her bag. I'll see you later. The door closed. The house went silent. That silence didn't feel suffocating anymore. Felt like space. I went back to the office and spread the documents out again. Mortgage statements. Proof of initial deposit. Transfer confirmations from my previous property sale. Joint account contributions. Her salary had increased significantly over the last year, so had certain unexplained expenditures. I opened the credit card statements. High-end restaurants. Boutique hotel charges. Not frequent. Strategic. One every few weeks. Enough to blend into business expenses. Enough to hide in plain sight. My jaw tightened, but not in anger. In recognition. This wasn't sloppy. This was structured. I pulled out a notebook. I'm not dramatic. I don't believe in revenge fantasies. But I do believe in preparation. I wrote down dates. Cross-referenced them with the nights she'd come home late. With the weeks she'd been traveling. With the Aspen conference that never existed. The pattern wasn't chaotic. It was consistent. Private room upstairs. Again. I closed the notebook and leaned back. For the first time since the reception, I let myself feel it fully. The betrayal. Not the image of them standing close. Not the hand on her waist. The manipulation. The way she turned every doubt back on me. Made me question my instincts. Made me apologize for asking reasonable questions. That part cut deeper. Cheating is an act. Gaslighting is erosion. And I'd been eroded carefully. I stood up and walked through the house. The living room she'd redesigned last year to look more executive. The dining table where we used to eat takeout on Fridays before her late meetings became routine. The bedroom where she'd started sleeping on the edge of the mattress instead of curled into me. How many nights had I reached for her and felt distance? How many times had I told myself it was stress? I stopped in front of our wedding photo on the hallway wall. We looked young, uncomplicated. We didn't have trajectories back then. We had plans. There's a difference. My phone buzzed. A text from her. Board call ran long. Might be even later tonight. No emoji. No warmth. Just update. I stared at the message. Then typed back. Okay. No questions. No pushback. That would confuse her more than anger ever could. I picked up my keys. Drove to the bank. Not to empty accounts. Not to do anything impulsive. To separate. To open an individual account. Quietly, the woman at the desk smiled politely. Joint account changes? Not yet, I said. Just planning ahead. Planning ahead. That phrase felt steady in my mouth. After the bank, I drove to my workshop. The smell of oil and metal grounded me instantly. Machines don't pretend. If something's broken, it makes noise. If something's misaligned, it vibrates. You diagnose it. You fix it. Or you replace the part. No ego. No manipulation. I ran my hands over the cold steel of a disassembled engine. Clarity settled deeper. I wasn't going to confront her tonight. Or tomorrow. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of shaping the narrative. I was going to gather everything I needed first. Then move. Strategically. Just like she had. That evening I came home before her. Sat at the kitchen table with the documents neatly stacked. Not out. Not displayed. Just ready. The house was quiet again. At 9:47 p.m. Headlights swept across the living room walls. Her car. I listened to the front door open. Her steps inside. The soft thud of her heels on wood. She walked into the kitchen. "You're still up?" "Yeah." "How was your day?" she asked automatically. "Productive." She smiled faintly. "Mine too." Of course it was. She moved to the sink, turned on the faucet. I watched her reflection in the window above it. Composed. Untouched. The bracelet glinted under the kitchen light. And she caught me looking again. "You're staring." "I'm observing." She laughed lightly. "You really need to relax." Relax. The word used to comfort me. Now it felt like instruction. Like a reminder of my role. Don't notice. Don't question. Don't disrupt. I stood slowly. "I'm going to bed." "Already? Big day tomorrow." She nodded. "Good night." No kiss. No pause. Just routine. Upstairs. Lying in the dark. I stared at the ceiling. There's a moment in every collapse when the structure stops creaking. When the cracks stop widening. When everything simply settles into the shape it was always going to take. That's where I was. Not heartbroken. Not hysterical. Settled. She thought she was managing perception. Controlling variables. Protecting her ascent. But she'd made one miscalculation. She assumed I would fight emotionally. That I'd explode. That I'd chase. She didn't realize I was stepping back. And when you step back quietly enough, the other person doesn't notice the exit until the door is already closed. Tomorrow I would call a lawyer. Not out of spite. Out of alignment. Because the marriage hadn't ended behind that partition. It ended the moment she decided I was part of her past trajectory instead of her future. And now I was simply adjusting course. Without drama. Without noise. Without asking permission. The lawyer didn't look surprised when I told him everything. He just listened, nodding slowly, like he'd heard the story 100 times before. "Do you want confrontation?" he asked. "Or control?" "Control," I said without hesitation. We started with separation of finances, quiet transfers, documentation, dates aligned with statements. I gave him copies of the hotel charges, the fake conference email, the timeline I'd built. He didn't react emotionally. He reacted strategically. That helped. At home, Emily kept playing her role. Late dinners, executive calls, casual mentions of Ray like it meant nothing. I responded calmly. No accusations. No tension. The quieter I became, the more relaxed she seemed. She thought the storm had passed. What she didn't realize was that I wasn't calming down. I was stepping out. And when you step out without warning, the other person doesn't get a chance to rewrite the ending. 3 weeks later, I handed her the envelope at the kitchen table. No speech. No build-up. Just her name written neatly across the front. She frowned slightly. "What's this?" "Read it." The silence stretched as she flipped through the pages. Her composure cracked slowly, not dramatically. Just enough to show she hadn't expected this. "You're overreacting," she said first. Then, "We can fix this." Then finally, "This isn't fair." Fair. I looked at her steadily. The reception wasn't the problem. The lies were. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the stage. "I'm not competing with your future," I said quietly. "I'm building my own." For the first time in months, she didn't have a counter. And that silence felt like freedom.